As we progress through the day, I think you'll start seeing, come on up. Yeah. You'll start seeing that we've got a couple of interesting companies who are talking about their journeys, and then you'll also hear about more of the technology as well. So welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, here, the green button goes forward.
Great.
So I think we can get the first slide up for Chad. So thanks for joining us, and thanks for talking about E&J Gallo's journey. I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself to the audience as they're coming in.
Sure. My name's Chad Rich. As Ted said, I'm the Senior Director of Sales and Innovation Technology for the E&J Gallo Winery. I've been there for 5 years. Initially, I was brought in to start a technology innovation lab. So I've been working through that process for the last 5 years, and eventually grown into supporting sales and our commercial operations there. So.
You know, and I am always surprised when I talk to people around the world who don't know who Gallo is, because I think, I mean, as a Californian myself, and having grown up in the Napa Valley, I mean, it's just such an amazing story, an amazing family that created the company. But maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the company.
Sure, yeah. So Gallo started back in 1933 at the repeal of Prohibition by two brothers, Ernest and Julio Gallo. They had a desire to make some wine. They went to the local library and found a recipe. They secured a $5,000 loan from their parents, and they agreed on a brotherly bet that Ernest would be able to sell more wine than Julio can make, and Julio would make more wine than Ernest could sell. And so with that, they started off, and now today the largest family-owned winery and exporter of California wines in the world. Over, I think, now 150 brands. We're humble by nature. The company's very humble by nature, as is the family. So you don't see the Gallo signature on many of our products, but we are about 25 to 30% of the wine category when you in traditional retail.
It's amazing. And I know since you're a family-run company and you're privately held, you don't talk about these numbers, but I will just mention, I looked up on Forbes, and you are one of the largest family-owned companies in the world. I think Forbes had you at number 80, which I'm a little scared by the other 79 that are bigger than you, and they're also family-owned, but a tremendous company, not just in wine and in spirits as well.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely, absolutely.
But actually, you know, so taking us back to the beginning of Gallo and Prohibition, the wine industry and the spirits industry is kind of complicated. So maybe you can explain why it is that it's so complicated, especially in a sales and marketing innovation role that you're in. Yeah.
And it's something I'm still learning about today, 5 years in, but it is a very complicated marketplace. We follow a 3-tier distribution system, which means that any alcohol manufacturer or supplier must go through a distributor, who then must sell to a retailer and then ultimately to the end consumer. And so legally we have to abide by that 3-tier system, and it creates some complexity in our go-to-market path. And so you know, with that, there's a lot of moving parts in working with our own sales organizations, our distributors, and our customers, and how we communicate across that value chain. But you know, Gallo's become very effective at that over the last few years.
So how do you, from an IT perspective, think about transforming a company that's been, you know, evolving in this model since 1933?
Yeah. Well, so I think that's one of the aspects of what the innovation or a technology center at Gallo was meant to be, right? It was to help us iteratively explore new technology to solve business problems. You know, so we started that lab, like I said, 5 years ago, really with a focus on our commercial environment with sales and marketing, and across that 3-tier distribution system. And about the same time, we were going through a strategy reset with our sales, or refresh with our sales organization. And one of the key differentiators that the sales organization is looking for is, how do we give time back to our salespeople? We want them in the store selling. We like them not spending time on sales or non-sales specific tasks, right? So that seemed like a perfect opportunity to use an iterative innovation approach. Again, the value chain's complicated, the internal go-to-market path within our own operations is complicated, and we didn't have a quick solve for that. So we found it a perfect example of how we could use the innovation lab to go out and explore. And that's when we happened upon RPA technology and beginning to iterate on the possibilities there.
Well, I think it's fascinating because a lot of companies start their RPA journey really with a back office function, a finance function or a procurement function or maybe even HR function. And yet you started with sales. You started with that front that customer facing. I mean, now I appreciate you're not actually talking to the end drinker of the wine,
right, not the
but your
consumer.
customers,
That's
right?
right.
Your distributors and the retailers that they flow through. So how did the Innovation Center start that ideation journey?
Yeah. So one of the key themes that we heard through the strategy refresh was sales. I mean, we heard some really big ideas for the company to go after, which we're certainly focused on and supporting from an IT standpoint. But sometimes it's the smaller things, it's the little annoyances that actually bubble up into some pretty big problems and are kind of hard to solve for. And one of those problems is our go-to-market with innovation, right? We bring a new product to market. We have a ton of process that we've got to go through internally to make sure that we followed all of our legal and compliance checks, that we've worked with customer service, that we've worked with our distributors and the local state regulators to make sure that product is legally or can be legally sold in the marketplace, right? So that introduces a lot of complexity internally and externally, and quite frankly, our sales organization is one of the biggest pain points. We're launching 90-some new items this year, just in this fiscal year. We're looking to acquire another 33% portfolio from a competitor. So when you think about the amount of information that people are seeking when they're trying to take those products to market, it becomes very complex. But the problem is that the process spans multiple teams, multiple systems, some very low-tech systems like PowerPoint and email, some bigger systems like SAP. So there's not just a simple workflow solve to make all of this come to life. And we thought this is a perfect opportunity to try some things around RPA and within the Innovation Center to see if we can help improve.
Mm-hmm. So the problem, it sounds like you talk about the PowerPoints and the Excels and the SAPs. In some cases, you've got something that would be sort of a more traditional RPA problem that you'd solve, where you say, I want to emulate the work that a human's doing, much as we heard from a CenturyLink discussion before. In other cases, so you've got human beings in the loop, where you've got to be able to give them visibility into what's going on with the process and let them make decisions. And so how do you manage that sort of connection between the human who's got to be connected and what their visibility, what their vision of the process is versus what's going on in the back end?
Yeah, so it's a good question because there's some parts of this process that were simple or seem simple to automate because they're in a system and it's simply having RPA reach into those systems and notify when the product's moving along the process. But then there's some things that are undocumented from a people and process standpoint that we had to dig into. So from that aspect, we launched an internal Lean Six project to really explore the process and identify what those steps are, work with those key stakeholders to understand what would not only help improve visibility to new items, but what could help them do their jobs more effectively, because there certainly was a lot of pain across that value chain. So we attacked it on two fronts. And ultimately what we're trying to strive for is something very simple in nature, which is we modeled our idea off the Domino's pizza tracker, right? So what we'd like to be able to do is give our sales organization and internal organization a simple, easy way to track where that new product or set of products in the portfolio are in the pipeline and getting to their market, right? So this would be tailored. If I'm in Indiana, I can see when these products will be available for my distributors in my market, or Ohio or Illinois, et cetera, right? But very simple idea, but a lot of complexity behind the scenes to make the simple updates out to an app like that happen, and that's where the process and the RPA come into hand.
Yeah, so I think this is really fascinating because I think, in some cases when we think about RPA, we think, I'm just going to buy one product. I'm going to go buy UiPath, and I'm going to be done. But in fact, actually, what you're describing is a much more complex problem where you actually need to bring multiple products together. And in one case, something that you're building that's custom, which is a mobile app for your field.
Yep.
But then that connects to a workflow, which is based on Catalytic, which is managing how people and bots are interacting with each other.
That's right.
And then you can have an RPA product on the back end to be able to do that true sort of closed system, unattended bot automation, where you're going into the SAP system to update an availability of a product or something. But you've got to make all those things work together, right? And so that starts really creating a challenge around how, as an organization, you think about automation as a category. It's complex, right?
Yeah, and I think we are even in our early journey. A lot of people are talking about RPA. There's a lot of pull for it now. They see the potential, but it is looked at a little bit monolithically, right? Which is not. Which is, to your point, it's not the case, right? There's a suite of tools. You really have to understand what you're trying to accomplish, what tools fit best for working with the big ERPs like SAP. What are the best tools that are good for end users or business people to interact with, and then what are those things that you just have to use some elbow grease and some technology internally to leverage some of the existing platforms.
Yeah. I mean, I heard this from you, and I've heard it from other companies out there. So sort of a knee-jerk reaction to say, hey, we need to go pick the one RPA product, right? And in fact, actually, when you go to Gartner and you look at their study across companies that are who are now at scale with RPA, they find that actually companies are using on average 8 to 10 different products in their automation initiatives.
I think it's a practice, right? It's a set of tools, a set of skills, a set of people, but with a common focus on that competency, right? Yeah.
So what happened after you introduced this pizza tracker?
Right.
So what was the next thing that happened in terms of people saying, hey, I want to do more things?
Yeah. So again, we're staying with the sales group. There's a lot of excitement around the idea of new item introductions, and so again, not earth-shattering, big strategic type of targets here, but some fun things to work on and meaningful for the individual salesperson in the field. First one is what we call a GSM in the box. It's our general sales meeting. So every quarter we have across the country our sales managers working with our distributors, getting them excited about new product launches, and we call those general sales meetings. And it's typically just going in programming and pricing and innovation, et cetera. And I'm sure most CPG companies have similar events. The challenge is that the time it was taking for salespeople to gather all the different various PowerPoint presentations and put together the presentation for that meeting. It varied in the amount of time and complexity. It also varied in quality, right? And so we wanted to see if we could attack all three of those challenges, and that's what we call GSM in a box. So we're allowing now through RPA our sales representatives to identify what meeting they're going to throw, what content types they need to have, and then let the RPA do the work, save them time, and also make sure that we're going after the right quality cues in those meetings. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think this is actually a really important point, because what you're doing is you're taking one of the most valuable assets that you have as a company, your salespeople, and your salespeople's time to be out there in the field meeting with their customers. And instead of them spending their time putting a PowerPoint together, right, you're saying, hey, let me actually automate that part so you free up that time. It's not about saying, hey, I want to have fewer salespeople.
No.
I want to have more sales time on the ground walking around my customers' offices.
Absolutely. Right? As I mentioned earlier, we've got growth, high single-digit growth goals on an annual basis. We're looking to expand our portfolio sometime, let's say, in the next 8 months by 33%. We are not looking to expand, overhead in sales or any supporting function by that same magnitude. So it's almost imperative that we find ways to work more effectively, or we're just going to get lost in that space.
So now you started out in sales. Is this now expanding across the organization and going outside into maybe some of those more traditional RPA categories like finance and procurement?
Absolutely. So I think we've also just gone through a major SAP implementation. We're learning a lot as we come out of hypercare. And one of those things we're learning is people are relearning their jobs in the existing SAP environment. And there's a lot of pull from finance and some of the supply chain operation functions for thinking about how we can automate some of those routines. It seems a little bit counterintuitive that you would implement a major ERP system and then have to go look for automation within. But I do think it's part of the just retraining, and before we just go retrain on how to manage within that system, maybe there's ways we can optimize and give time back to the operator. Yeah.
So as the idea of RPA starts to bubble in the organization, really sponsored by the Gallovation initiatives that you created, and people get excited. What do you have to do in terms of the change in people's thinking about their work, right?
Yeah, so that's a good, again, from a Gallo, we are a privately held, family-owned company. I think and maybe outside, I used to work for Kellogg's for 10 years in consulting for 7 years before that. So I'm very familiar with, as there's expectation as you drive efficiency that you let folks go and you reduction in force. So I know that conversation hangs out there, but Gallo is a family-owned company. That's not in their DNA. So people are their biggest asset, and you'll hear that from Joe Gallo, our CEO, all the way down and throughout. And so really it becomes about helping people understand how technology can help assist, make them more efficient, because again, with the aggressive growth goals we have, I think everyone either understands today or will begin to understand how important it is to be able to shed some of the less efficient activities and really focus on, the goal in front of you. And I think technology can help us do that.
Well, I think, to my mind, this is one of the most crucial areas around how you manage that change. Because when organizations start rolling out automation, then people can get frightened. I mean, I appreciate the fantastic culture you have at Gallo, where people maybe feel more comfortable that their jobs are not at risk, but their jobs will change.
Yes, absolutely.
You moved my cheese, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. You're not maybe less at risk at losing your job at Gallo, but you're at the same risk of you need to be able to adopt the change, because it's coming, and it's coming quickly. Absolutely. Change management's huge.
So employees have to learn certain things.
Absolutely.
How are their jobs going to change? Managers. I mean, I think one of the things that I hear often is that in most organizations, managers are sort of compensated and valued based on the number of people who work for them, as opposed to the output of the function, right? And so with bots, that's going to change, right?
Yeah.
You say, hey, you know what? I don't actually need 25 people processing invoices anymore, because the bots are doing it.
Yeah.
So who's the manager of that invoice processing function now? Is their role diminished or enhanced, right?
Right. Well, and I think that the prior presentation panel was really interesting to me to hear how they're bringing all that information from from the RPA technology into analytic, right? And really now quantifying the value and the magnitude of what the technology is driving within. I think that's actually something I'm going to take back with me to really start thinking about how do we drive that same transparency, because to your point, it's not about the number of people, it's about the magnitude of the work and what's going on underneath the hood, right? So yeah.
Well, and I really think automation is then a real, I kind of refer to it as a gateway drug. Maybe that's the wrong way to do it in a business context, right? But it's a gateway drug to AI, right? And I think as we start thinking about how we're really going to change the way that decisions are made and how we're going to transform the role of people in the organization, there's this balance of people and technology that is going to shift, and we're going to have this hybrid workforce. Enormous challenge, but enormous on the tail end of that, enormous opportunity for people to do more of the things that people are really good at.
Absolutely. As you were saying that, what came to mind, we had an innovation lab where our future CEO, E&J Gallo, attended, and Ted was there with the team, and we took him through the technology, RPA technology, and Ernest was very receptive and interested in what we were looking to automate. But the thing that stuck out to him at that C level was the data that's collected behind the scenes. He was very interested in the ability to now understand where are things getting hung up. What are those steps in the process? What can we learn about the process today to potentially change it in the future, not just automate it? And I thought that was pretty telling from a C level executive.
Well, absolutely, and I think one of the things that hangs up companies in their journey to AI is the lack of that organized information. So by the way, does it go back and forth? You have Joe as the CEO
it seems
now,
to right now,
and then you're gonna have another Joseph.
We'll see. Yeah.
or Jay, Julio.
Yeah. There's definitely some pattern to that.
Right. I know how to name my children now.
Yeah.
I want to make sure there's a few minutes left here for questions. I think we've got 5 minutes left, 4 or 5 minutes left. It's a question back here. If the person with the microphone could bring the microphone.
Hi, thank you for the interesting conversation. I'd like to really touch base with you after this, because I have a lot of tactical questions for you, but I'm just going to ask one of many that I have. Have you given any consideration to what type of performance metrics or effectiveness improvement metrics you will consider going forward? I know it's kind of maybe early stages, But I always think of the kind of the end game, so you probably will want to demonstrate, this is how it was and now it's how it is, here's your effectiveness or a productivity improvement, whatnot. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, so on the use case around the new item introductions, we did a pretty extensive time study with our sales organization as we went through that strategy review. We found that, let's say on average, a day and a half to 2 days of our average salesperson's time was being spent not in front of a customer. We recognize that there are activities such as planning and preparing for the sales call that are necessary that do take you away from that customer interaction. But the goal of the sales organization was to ensure that we have everybody in the field at least 4 days a week. So our goal there was, again, looking across a lot of different activities, how could we automate? And in this one activity with the new item process, we felt we could give back an hour to 2 hours of each salesperson's time a week. So it's quite a big impact if we get this right. And that's how I think we'll measure our initial success. And I do think some of those productivity measures, giving time back to sales, are the ones that we're going to be driving on that side of the organization. Finance, I think, is still kind of an open question on what are those indicators. But I think it'll be similar around efficiency or productivity improvements.
But I do think one of the interesting things that Gallo has done is also looked at not just cost savings or cost
Correct.
avoidance,
Yep.
right? But said, hey, how are we actually being more productive? How do we drive our revenue growth? And then in one of the examples, you were looking at how to improve procurement. Right. Right now, you have a process where every salesperson individually goes out with their own credit card and purchases things. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it's similarly, if like the general sales meetings, as you can imagine, there's just tactical things like buying pens and paper and point of sale and ordering costumes if they're going to have some kind of elaborate meeting. But all that's done individually. Person by person. And so one of the ideas we have around that is, could we, through RPA, not only centralize and make that simpler, but then also having the information, knowing what's going on and what's being ordered, are there ways to procure that? And are there some cost savings in that procurement cycle where we could either collectively bring all of the orders together and get better deals on an order for point of sale or utensils, or look for inefficient spend within the network? So
well, and also for those sales reps that are less creative,
right?
Give them some really creative ideas of how to hold their GSM meeting and
drive the quality. Yeah.
Do we have another question? Yeah.
In data analysis, people say that 80% is cleansing the data and 20% is doing the actual analytics. Did you find the same as it came to your business processes? Were your processes ready for RPA, or did you have to spend a lot of time preparing and understanding them first?
That's a really good question. Yes, the process piece is huge, right? And so what we've tried to do with the help of Catalytic is we understood the process is massive, okay? And so we try to parallel path it. We said, look, we've got to go and really spend a lot of time understanding what the process is before we just start automating, because hopefully there's some efficiency that just is gained by understanding the end-to-end. So we absolutely, and we're still, like I said, we started a Lean Six project on that, and we continue to refine that process. But the other thing we said is we don't want to wait until the entire process is defined before we start to automate, because there's some simple, quick wins, both things we can help sales with, and also start learning about how to use RPA. And so that's the journey we've been on, is kind of parallel pathing and automating where we can, with the intention of knitting all that automation together once we understand the full process.
Fantastic. One last question. Yep, go ahead.
Hi, I'm back. I have a question for you. So when you were looking at those low-hanging fruit, were you able to, it would be interesting to learn what the use cases were, and that's part A of my question, I guess. And part B would be, if you were to think of those use cases, are there any specific ones that would be more front end, that would be visible to, say, business users or like salespeople or like managers who don't really appreciate the back end, automation stuff? So if you could just maybe summarize it would be awesome to hear. Thank you.
Well, absolutely, we're thinking about the use cases. And I will say the other thing that's interesting about RPA is, being in IT and working with my IT brethren, I know how challenging it can be to put resources and effort against things that are seen as tactical for the organization. Everyone wants to go do the ERP or the big CRM or the big AI. You know, there's plenty of big projects to put all of your people against. The smaller, hey, we've got a new item introduction thing that's a little complicated is not always the attractive project to go after. So, you know, in talking with our head of operations and IT, he finally came to me and said, look, Chad, I kind of get it now. These are projects that I'm not going to go spend $10 million on it to implement a big system, but there's not a quick solve with existing technology. That's a great fit for RPA. And I think that from my point of view, those use cases should be where the business feels the pain, right? I think there's absolutely opportunity to do RPA automation behind the scenes, but the biggest wins for us are going to be those things that save our salespeople time, help them get the information they need, that help the finance team work through their processes more effectively. Those are the wins, because we certainly have enough big, back-end projects to pursue with big IT dollars.